Dave. Let's talk about collecting radios, okay? So about 30 years ago, it all started with this one. And it was my coworker's radio, and similar to this one. And I saw it when I went over past his desk, and I asked him about it, and he said, well, you ought to hear it play. So he turned it on, and I was like, wow. The sound is incredible on these things, even though they only command about 20, 30 bucks in the market. They have great sound. So this is the first radio I ever bought. I still have it because the sound is still good on it. And actually, I got really ingrained in the collecting arena when it started to hum. And then I had to figure out, how to fix it. And as it turned out, there was a fellow that, Lloyd Thoburn, who was doing jukeboxes, and I found him, and he let me have my pick of capacitors and tubes and whatnot. He only charged me $1 for tubes, and after I went through there, I was picking up 45s for $1, and that was a pretty good deal. So I was able to start cheap, and then for about the first, 3 years, I was buying everything in sight. And then, so what happens with that is, you spend the next 5 years trying to get rid of all the junk that you ended up buying. I'm going to come to, I've got a couple of mirrored radios I wanted to show you here. There seems to be a story on everything, okay? Now you're going to see Dave in the mirror there, right? And the interesting part was I wanted to get a peach mirrored, peach mirror. And I found one up in Adamstown, and it was hanging on a wall in the second story of one of those malls that are there in Adamstown, the antique malls. And I offered the guy $400 for it, and he wouldn't take it. He wouldn't sell. He was the owner, and he wouldn't sell at all. And a number of years later, I was in the thrift store right around the block here, and it was sitting on the floor. And I asked them how much they wanted. They sold it to me for $5. So. These radios that are underneath here, okay, this is a mirror ray radio in green. They made 4 colors, and they made 2 designs, okay? You're going to see another design when we get to the other room. But very basic radios, but they're very collectible. The mirrored radios with the tops on them, the mirror rays, okay? So I've got the clear and the green, okay, sitting here. I wanted to show everybody, in case they never looked inside of a Scott radio. This is an E.H. Scott. This is the Waverly 23 tube all wave, okay? And the one next to it is also a 23 tube all wave, but it has the 7 knobs versus the 5. And I thought I probably needed both. So that's what I ended up collecting. But if you'll look, shine the camera in there, don't hit the you can see that it's not only the tuner is all chromed, but also the power supply that sits on the bottom. I'm going to leave it like this, and we're going to move along. Well, we had, I started collecting art deco, okay, I liked them, and I found that if you go on eBay, you'll notice this one is not in my collection. This one's for sale. This was a donation to the Historical Society. I've got it all working and playing and whatnot, and that one, I need to move along. It is what we call the beam of light record player, which actually has a light bulb in there that comes and shines onto a mirror and then is picked up by a photoelectric cell. Nice thing about these is that you don't get the static off the record. The bad part about them, you got to adjust them every once in a while because they get out of alignment. I collected these 2 here. This one is kind of my favorite, thanks to Domi Sanchez, okay, from our club. He ended up picking this one up for me. It came out of Colorado, and it's what they call the American Lincoln grandfather clock radio. And I did some research on it, and it actually came out of Marion, Virginia. And that was the only manufacturer of radios in Virginia. So I figured we were going to start a museum. This would be a piece that I'd want to have in that museum because it reflects, the Virginia name. Mm-hmm. Actually, it's called the Virginia Lincoln grandfather clock radio. A couple of these are familiar to most people. Actually, this one, Ed Lyon did a write-up on this little radio. It's the Grunow 550. And this one is the one that came later on, which actually had octal tubes in it instead of the regular. This one, right above the $10 bill that someone's leaving for me, is an Emerson AD128, and I've had it in our old equipment contests, and so people could see it, and nobody has seen another one like it. It's got the motif on the sides here of the 1938 Zenith. I had a lot of that going on, but actually that radio is actually from the mid-early 30s. Okay, and the thing is, on this one, it's the same chassis, okay, that you're going to find in the Catalin radios, the little Tombstone Catalin radios. So that, I think, is an interesting art item, and we'll talk about that later. I'm going to come back to this one, but I wanted to show you my Sparton collection. Okay, so these are my Sparton radios. The only one I'm missing is the Nocturne. Somebody's going to have to give me that one. I'm not going to spend that kind of money, you know, for the Nocturne. And I was making, if you read one of the articles in Radio Age, I wrote the article on how I made 3 of those Model 409s down here. And this is an original, and that was the one I modeled all of those after. Now, I've had a couple of these. Now, you know, let me talk about the club meetings. It's great going to the club meetings, okay, because some of the things you find there are the Spartan sled in peach. And I had one of the members come up to me and ask me if I was interested in taking a look at one and buying it from him. He had to get his kid through college and he needed the money. So I bought it, I had cleaned it up. This is not the same one, but you'll notice that it has copper, right, as opposed to, you know, the chrome. Okay, so yeah, that's what you're looking for when you're collecting these. And the other thing that you're looking for is on the 557, which is the 3-knob version, right? You've got like a crystalline finish on it. I don't know if you can get a good shot of that, but okay, that's the finish it should have. And what happens is it gets roughed up and everything, and then they paint it black. So that's what you're looking for when you're collecting those, right? And then down on the bottom, I have fairly rare the Motorola. You see it typically in the triangle side over on the right there, and you see those pretty commonly, but you don't see the one with the fish on it. And there's a light inside that actually lights up that fish. So it's not something that somebody made. As we come along, this is the 15-tube Zenith 270. It's the 15U 270, and I got it in this condition. Okay, I haven't done a thing to it except, you know, restore the chassis and all that. And I found this in Illinois at an auction. And if there hadn't been another collector there, I probably would have gotten it for 90 bucks. As it turned out, I had to pay 280, but it was still a very good deal. The radio sitting on top of it is the Spartan 5518. Okay, normally you'll see those in like a wood grain faux finish that comes on a metal. It's a metal radio, and you'll see a wood grain faux finish. And when that faux finish wears off, you can't really replace it. So what a lot of people do is they take the metal and they actually chrome it. They have it chromed. So you'll see those in chrome. This is the first one I saw in copper, and I thought it was copper plated until I took it to Kutztown and I was trying to sell it, and someone says, you know, that's solid copper. It's not plated. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And sure enough, I looked in the back, and it's the only one I've ever seen in copper, so it's copper. These two radios here speak for themselves. They're the Zenith Walton set, the 12S232. They're both the 232s. And you have to ask, these are the only 2 radios that I have that are duplicates. And you have to ask the question, why do you have 2 of the same radios?
Why do you have 2 of the same radios, Geoff?
Well, because this one I like better, and my wife won't let me sell this one. She likes this one. So that's
that's because she's got blonde hair, and that's lighter color.
Yeah. Yes, that's the story. Over here, this is something that you all have seen. It's been in Radio Age. It's been on display at in the old farmhouse. It's been on display at the Modernism show at the Dulles Expo Center, and that is the RCA store. I'm going to turn it around so you can see the inside of it. You got to keep it on a swivel, you know, so people can enjoy it, right? And actually, the fellow that makes this is Walter Buffington out of Connecticut, And this was his first set that he made, and he did it just to demonstrate, you know, the dollhouse furniture that he makes. And after 3 days of bugging him about it, he finally sold it to me. So very, very pleased with that. That was a good purchase. It's sitting on a radio, by the way, in a table. So that's the RCA drum table, and there's a little radio in there as well. Now I collect Emerson radios, and I have the Tombstone radios, and I picked up a console radio. I had to have a chair side. So this one came up on eBay within the last 2 years, and it came out of Pennsylvania, and that's model F133. In this case here, I don't have a whole lot of radios. I keep them on shelves. These are mirrored radios again, and this is the Reflections of Hollywood is who makes these, and so they came out of California. The one here has been at the Old Equipment Contest, and that belonged to a lady called Maureen Orcutt. She won it at the 1936 St. Augustine Lynx, and as it turned out, she was still alive. My co-worker found a phone number for me. I called her and I talked to her, and this is the only radio that I have provenance on. I knew it belonged to her. And then over here, your typical machine age radios. You know, on the top there is machine, and then the one below it there is the Colonial 300. And the thing about it was, when I first got it, right, it only had one. It only had one label on it, you know, one escutcheon. And what happened was I couldn't find another one. And then I'm at Kutztown at the swap meet. So here's a plug for Kutztown, right? I found a brand new pair that actually matched what I was supposed to have. So, you know, when you go to these swap meets, it's a good thing. The poker radio, okay, if you haven't seen one, they have the shot glasses and the flasks. The flasks are on the right, shot glasses are on the left, and the cards and the poker chips are in the top. It's called the poker radio. Okay, so this is a treat for you all, because these are radios that seldom come out of boxes. I've had this one, okay, this is the two Emersons. They made it in 3 different varieties of wood. Okay, so here's the light oak or whatever. This is the mahogany. And the only person I know that has the walnut is since passed this past year, and that's Chris Coaches. And he was the one that got me collecting these. So, you know, Chris, yeah, here's to you. And also the brush bugs, I dug them out of a box so y'all could see them, okay, but they, the brush bugs I've had for a number of years, and typically I don't display them because I just don't have the display area. You might want to say, why do you have 2 baseball radios? Well, actually I had 3. I mean, you know, but I'd like to keep this one, but I've got to repair that. And before I repair it and keep it and put it on a shelf somewhere, I would sell this one, okay? And this other one over here is the football radio, and if you don't come to our Virginia meets, okay, that's where I picked that up, and actually it went for $20 in our auction. It's all metal, so it's a real tricky fix to make sure that that chassis, you know, is isolated from the cabinet. Now in the back over here, I've had these on display in the museum at Frying Pan Farm Park, and I've also had it at the Dulles Expo Center on the Modernism show. And what this is what we call a remote record player. And Airline made them. This is a Zenith, okay, and I thought that would be appropriate to have with the Zenith radios. But what happens on this is, let me kick this thing on, okay, and what it does is it broadcasts. Okay, and it broadcasts to any radio that's tuned to that frequency, which I'm going to do right now. So come over here. Come over here.
Fantastic.
So you can play your record and listen to it on any radio in your house. All right. So that's one of the items that, and then this reason I wanted to talk about this radio, we'll come back to it just before we close, okay? So that'll play until the record goes on. All right, so you saw that part of it, all right, and I want to show you my talking house. Now, if you don't have one, you really need to get one because it's sitting down below there on a shelf, right? I've got it tuned to 1120, right? And what I can do is, right, what I can do is I come over here and I plug a little CD player. Whoa, a little CD player in. And all right, so what it does, it starts broadcasting on 1120. So let's come back over here to our Rogers radio and tune in 1120 with the volume up.
You must remember this. A kiss is still a kiss.
So you can play your sound on any radio. You don't have to have your radios modified, okay, to listen to the music. And we'll just let that play in the background as we continue. How's that?
Sounds good.
Okay. Watch the record. That was the biggest beat I've ever seen. Okay, now we come to the radio room. Yes. Yeah, sometimes it's overwhelming. And I'll try to get out of the way. Over on the left wall here as you walk in, I keep the Mickey Mouse and the Snow White radios. And actually the first deco radio I bought was that Feta 260 in the upper left there. And then the little radios will fit on the shelves up by the window there. And a couple of them are very rare. This one right here, Ed Lyon and I are still trying to figure out what that is. It's a Motorola of some sort, but as you can see, it's got the same dial as the Clinton that's next to it, and actually those chassis are made by Clinton. So this particular radio, this Mickey Mouse, is painted, and they were painted by the Disney Studios back when this radio, which the one you're familiar with and they rep with there, came out. And then a little bit later, this other 411 model on it came out. I used to have a red one, but with the red trim, and I sold that. I like record players. As you can see, this is a record player here too, and it's a Scotty, and I'm not going to drag it out and start playing it for you, but it's a pretty rare beast, and it's nice to have. Now here's the other two Mirais, okay, one in blue and one in peach. And again, they have a different pattern than the ones you saw before with the vertical stripes up and down. This is one of the first consoles I bought, right? And I wanted to demonstrate, it's got also the beam of light. And that's why I'm not going to keep two. That other one, I've got to sell it. But it has the beam of light player in it as well. And this one, this beast, I dragged to the Dulles Expo Center for display as well, and that was this is a heavy radio. Now coming across here, I got to have some speakers too, right? So when I was demonstrating the speakers at the museum at Frying Pan Farm Park, okay, I wanted to show with the breadboards sitting over on the shelf over there, I had this speaker with them. And then I said, well, the sound was really tinty and everything. And I said, and then what happened was they tried the terracotta over here. And then finally they found that the cone speakers actually produced the best sound. And so that way I could demonstrate to the children and to the people that came to the park, the difference in the sound until they finally resolved it. This is new to the shelf, okay? I took down those other two Detrolas, the one that you saw with the mirrored fish on it, and this one I had picked up fairly recently, within the last year or two, and I decided to display it. Now these are the piano radios, the brass piano radios, okay? If you look at the ad from November of 1937, it says that they were gold plated, but in fact most of these have been brass. And years ago, one of our club members came up to me and said, I know you collect those brass piano radios, look what I found on eBay. and he had this radio. And within the last week or two, we finally made a trade, and I finally, after 20-some years, added that to my collection. Right. This one here I got from Stan Rosenstein many, many years ago. A nice set, and it's the model 147. And then this is the Stuart Warner 9151, which, you know, everybody is familiar with the Spade radio. They're a lot of fun, but I've had two of them that did not have the plate that's, you know, that the chassis has to attach to hold it in that position. So most of the two of them were floating, the chassis. So you have to have, and I made a template and everything, and if you need one, I'll make you one, okay? The next radio down is a Stuart Warner 9151, but it's a W, and it's really deco. I brought it to one of the club meetings for show and tell. The one down below here that I keep in a rag, I do that because this thing is like brand new, okay? And if you take a look at the way, okay, it's been restored, okay, you can see the gold lettering on the knobs, you can see the semi-gloss finish on it. Every detail is complete, and if I turn it around, you can see that, you know, even made a back for it, you know, that is just perfect. So who sells these kind of radios in this condition? Tom Hayes, okay, and he's down, I believe, Tuscaloosa. And you know, there's good elephant hunting down there because the Tuscaloosa in Alabama. And then the Hopalong Cassidy radios. Hopalong Cassidy was one of my favorites when I was a kid growing up. So you say, well, why do you have two of them? And they're both rearing. But I've got two more where they've actually, Clayton Boyd got upset when they came out with that because he said he would never have his horse do that, right? So they had to come out with a new foil where they've got three legs on, you know, three hooves on the ground and only one raised. This is your cadet collection here. They have various names for them. Again, mid-30s. Everything was kind of swimming in deco back then, and I picked up all three versions of it, of course, right? But no duplicates of the same version. And then piano radios. I wrote something to John Begg about piano radios were my soft spot. And when I first started collecting, there were two that I saw in Seattle, and I didn't buy them because I thought they were too pricey. And as it turned out, I molded over, and the fellow that sold me, Dick Young, is the one that sold me that Zenith that started me on that. He was going to Seattle, and I asked him if he could snag those two radios for me and bring them back, and he did. This is the original one from almost 30 years ago. I bought that, and I've got a burgundy one which I have boxed up, and I've got all the colors. So if you want to know about piano radios, I even made the parts for them too, and I made the legs, and I made the props and everything. I was selling them worldwide. It was a lot of fun. Over here are the Motorolas. You know, in the little cathedrals. This one is very rare. I picked this up in at our September, not this past year, but the year before, and it was at the our Radio Fest. You know, our Fall Fest that we have in September. And the thing that I'm trying to find for it, it was complete, except for the medallion that goes right here, and it should say Detrola on it. One of our members has it, but he doesn't want me boogering around with his radio. So we'll wait. This is the first console radio that I bought. It was in a third floor flat, and I had to walk up to it. And
Are you smart?
now, I repaired this radio almost 30 years ago, and it's still, there's no static, there's no hum. And I'm not gonna work.
Not if you care
And
for me.
it's playing the music being broadcast on the Talking House. So I tried to keep the collection eclectic. Okay, I like Emerson, so I've got Emerson wall radios. I've got the Majestic lineup here. Actually, They came out later in airline, these three, okay? And you can pick them out in airline too. When you're buying those though, let me show you something. On the Charlie McCarthy cabinet, which is the same, okay, there's 4 holes supporting the, you know, the chassis, all right? On the other ones, let me make sure he's the right one. See, this one is not correct, all right? He's got 4 holes, all right? Should not. You only need the 2, okay? And if I have a proper one here, I'll show it to you. Hopefully Hopalong, or the Lone Ranger is, yeah. This is the proper chassis for that, or the proper cabinet for this radio, okay? You're looking for the 2 holes. If it's got the 4 holes, it was one of these, and they converted it. All right, they came out later than the Charlie McCarthy. He was in there around late 30s, I think. And I'm going to turn this one off, okay? Going to take a break. The Crosley pup, along with the Bonzo dog, okay? That makes it extra special. And then in behind there somewhere, I've got the Crosley earphones, and they're hard to find, you know, so if you're looking. I keep this radio here. This is a Crosley also, and the speaker on this is this cardboard face. And this is what the face looked like when I bought the radio, right? And so I did an article for Antique Radio Classified, and somebody contacted me and said, no, I reproduced these and I'll send you one free. And not only did he send it to me free, but he made a back for it too. Right? So, you know, this collecting world that we're in, you know, it's all about, you know, contacts and networking, you know, and who, you know, getting together with people and you know, and just sharing your experiences. So this is the Model 10C breadboard. This is the most common, okay? They made a lot of these. This one here is the 12, and as you can see, it
Now, who made those, Jeff?
Atwater Kent.
Atwater Kent.
Atwater
Okay.
Kent. So that's 1924, okay, 10C, and then the 12 just quickly followed it. It's all about from the same time period. This one does work, and it plays with that horn. I've never worked on this one yet. Down here is a mirrored Motorola S grill. Okay, I can't tell you what the model is on that model number, but it's from the 40s, early 40s. And it has a story as well. That came from Ed Lyon through Paul Farmer. Okay. Paul got it from Ed, and then I got it from Paul. So we made our trades and everything. So, and then the RCA 128, okay, which, you know, I found early in my collecting, and it plays wonderfully, okay, and I keep the Radiotron doll next to him. The Charlie McCarthy hand puppet or whatever goes close to my Charlie McCarthy's there, and everybody's happy. We started out collecting the small cathedrals. You know, Wendy liked those, my wife liked those, and so, you know, that's why we have them. And you saw the Detrolas, so those are her happy ones. I had, I sold 50 radios this past 2 months, okay, and it all started off with, I had a, you know, these are the Emerson BT245s, okay, they have this kind of grill, and the yellow one there had this grill in it, okay, and so, you know, Jim in our club, actually I was fixing a radio for him that was, a friend of mine had sold to him and it wasn't working, so I picked it up in Maryland and took it home and fixed it. It had a bad switch, on-off switch, and it was shorting. So, you know, when I got all done with it, he said, thank you so much for doing that. Is there anything I can give you in exchange? And I said, well, you wouldn't happen to have a grill for a BT245, would you? And he says, as a matter of fact, I do. So, ladies and gentlemen, you know, it's all about, like I said, you know, networking. These...
Are the Fadas?
Yeah, the Fada bullets. This is the this is the 115. The 115 has the vertical bars, and I've only got the one, but it's in blue, and that makes it special. And I bought that a number of years ago. This is my second one. I sold the other one, and because I don't like to keep duplicates. Share. Now, when they were making these, Ed Lyon was explaining that when they bust them out of the mold, these would crack. So initially what they did was they just cut them out and they put a grill cloth in there. But they didn't sell very well. So they went to Opelon, Monsanto, and Catalin and said, hey, can you make, accessories, insert grills and handles and knobs that all match? And then, and then they sold very well. So these on the outside here are rarer than, the regular 1000s. And this is a 1000, as is the other one there too. This one, I've had 4 or 5 of these. You keep buying until you find one that is really nice, right? And then this is what they call this is the General Electric little jewelry box, right? And of course the chassis mounts from the bottom. It's an interesting chassis because it takes direct current, the direct current in, and it used to have has a 45 Z3 tube as the rectifier, but then 3 or 4 1-volt tubes. Well, actually there's a 3-volt, the 3V4 is in there, but it doesn't equal, the amount, so they had them on a resistance line cord. So years ago, I talked to Ed Lyon. He said, why don't you just use a 117 Z3, right, and move the pins, right?
Right, yeah.
So that's what I did, and it works great.
Works great. Yeah, well, because the rectifier.
Yeah, put a record, put a cord on.
You don't need to reduce it.
Yeah, you're ready to go. So, and then I bought. This is the Cadet model K25. Okay, I think the 26 is blue, right? But the reason I bought this, and actually I've had this on display many times, because I wanted to show people what happens with the extreme heat that these radios generate, right? This has got a crack across here, and as you can see, that's what we call a tube burn in the red color, okay? And here it is on the top as well. So the heat from these tubes over here fried this thing, and you can see on the inside, if I take the tube out, which is very hard to do,
I can see that it's black.
It's not only black, it's actually melted.
Mm.
So, the heat was intense enough to actually melt this Catalin plastic.
What tubes were those? Do you remember?
Yeah, they would be a 25 L6 and a 25 Z5.
Okay.
Would be on those, right? And then, of course, the typical, cathedrals. And I started with the Philcos. I had the Philco regular 20, and then I've got the 20B. The 21 is over here. My wife found that, the 21, in an little antique shop along Route 29 here in Virginia. And then I had the 70. Well, there's the 21, and then the 70. I had gotten at one of our swap meets, and the 90 I got from a fellow named Andrew Buckler, and his son Tom was our club member for a long time. Since I collect Emerson, I needed a console, and I wanted a deco one. So this one came up on eBay too, and it was delivered to me at Kutztown about 5-6 years ago. So you can find these things. The plate from the bottom there, this is Emerson radio, I got from one of our club members as well. I'll give you a hint. He was a former president of the club.
Okay.
So that tells you that. Now I love round radios, okay, as you can see, right? So I've got the globes here, right? These are a bear to work on. They really are, because you've got like 13 real fine wires running through into the base of the radio, where you have your speaker, your output transformer, and a Type 43 output tube. So all of that stuff has got to be generated in there, plus the power that gets to the upper part of the radio. All those wires have to go through there. And so it was very difficult working on those. The black one was playing when I got it, and then the white one I had to put all back together again. And it's playing too. As you notice, I like Atwater Kent cathedral radios as well. I'm not going to throw the numbers at you, but the 84, which was the first one that I bought, and I bought it before I even knew about the club, and that is our logo.
Yeah, that one's right, exactly.
And then I've got the 82 and the 80. So I've got all those covered. And then I love my Emerson radios, and my wife does too. Up on the top, you got the AX212s. The one there is the 367 or whatever. I love that radio on the top right because it's got curves everywhere. I mean, the sides are curved, the top is curved, the front has got the curved grill on it. So that's a fun radio. Got the Emersons. That's a 32. That's a 38. And you got the 25 right there. The 250 is down below. That was the earliest one. And but again, it's interesting because these are the Strad radios that everybody likes. Okay, so they made it in walnut and they made it in maple. But one you don't see very often is the one in the middle, and that's the big Strad. It's got a different model number and chassis from the other two. It's got one more tube, right? The one here is the 247, I think it's called, but they call it the Pagoda, and I've had a couple of those, but I sell them. And then, of course, the May West, okay, which everybody is familiar with, I hope, and I've had maybe 4 of those, and I just kept buying and selling. I never kept 2 at the same time.
We got to get the right perspective here.
And the thing, and the thing that's interesting about this radio, you really need the proper grill cloth, okay? And it's got the circles, okay? That's like the original. And there's an individual out in California that spent $1,000 to make the die for that, or to make, and so you're able to get those. And if you have any trouble, you can get hold of me, okay? This here is the Emerson 888, all right? And you're thinking, with all these old radios you have in your collection, why is this one here? Well, I'm taking you back to Radioactivity 2005, when Emerson was the theme. And what had happened was, I had found, my daughter, Becky, had found, some acorns in a bag in the antique mall up there in near Hagerstown, Maryland, right? One of those big malls. And she said, Dad, you can make knobs with these, right? So I did, and I made the knobs for the Snow White radio. And I was selling them on eBay, and this one fellow bought them, and he says, can you paint them for me? And I said, sure. He said, they're for my wife, that I'm going to give her, a Snow White radio for Christmas. She's the daughter of Benjamin Abrams. And I was like, wow, okay. So I got together with our auctioneer. I'm not allowed to mention names, right? But everybody knows Brian. And he invited them, and they said, sure, we'll come, but we don't want to pay. You want you to pay. We'll pay our way. So at the end of our banquet, and after the talk was done, she came forward and talked about what it was like living in their house. And she says, by the way, the Emerson 888 was named after me. And we said, what? And she said, everybody was wondering. And she says, I was born at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I weighed 8 pounds and 8 ounces. And my dad said, we need to do something with that. So that's the 888. And I had her autograph it.
Very cool.
So I told my kids, this is one we probably want to keep in the collection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's the story of the 888, right? And then the rest of them are, your typical variety. Now, the chassis that I showed you in the other room, the AD, for the AD, that big Tombstone radio, it's got the same chassis as this little bugger right here. And if you put the two of them together, you go, no way. But it is. And it's very similar to, the chassis there on the BT245, right, sitting up there. The one on the far end over there is the AU190. And actually, it came out after the BT245, and they were smart enough to turn the transformer, the output transformer, sideways instead of straight up and down, which is what cracked the tops of those radios. Okay, so I'm bringing you back to the Rogers radio, okay? And we learn something new every day. I've had this radio for a number of years. It showed up at Radioactivity probably 4 or 5 years ago, and the seller was looking to get $150 for it, right? Now, I think I can pick it up and I can show you what the back looks like. I'm going to do that really quick. And you'll notice it's got 2 chassis. Okay, don't take your time. This thing is heavy.
Yeah, no, very heavy.
So the interesting thing is, so you saw the remote record player sitting over the other, so that was 1938 for the remote record player. And I thought, okay, we had Wi-Fi in 1938, right? How cool is that? Right? And of course everybody marvels over that. So this radio, I started to work on it finally. Okay, the cabinet was a mess, right? The radio did work, but it was kind of staticky and it was in and out. And I'm gonna turn the volume down. And it's got doors that I have to put back on it. But I got it in the auction, the general auction, for $14. I didn't need it, I didn't want it, but I'm like, $14, I can't turn
let
this
it go.
down. So I go to work on this thing and I find out it's got all kinds of tricks and things to it. It was made in Canada, right? There's no model, or the model number doesn't match the schematic, but the best that we can figure, it's a 462B, or it's a 4624, right? Made by Rogers. Now the bottom part is the shortwave, right? The band switch, if you look at the band switch, it's got all the bands, and then you select the bands by turning this little dial here. Now it's not going to turn off of the AM, right? And I'm like, the shortwave isn't working. Why isn't it working, right? So I called the doctor up in Myersville, Maryland, and he said, well, Geoff, he says, on that shortwave, you got a 56 tube and a 57. He said, it's broadcasting. So what happens is, if you look close on the dial, there's a little green bar there, and it says on the bar, it says shortwave setting. So what you do is you turn your AM to 1000 on the dial,
1000
and then you can tune to the shortwave. Then it broadcasts the signal into
That's why it has 2 chassis.
the broadcast receiver. And I was like, that's 1934. So now we date Wi-Fi to 34. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But this is a really good playing radio. It's got 2 speakers in it, and it was a fun job.